There is a road you will never find on a map. It doesn't curve by accident. It doesn't end by mistake. Everyone who drives it believes they're just passing through, until the gas runs out, the clocks stop working, and the night refuses to end. This is not a story about getting lost. This is a story about being chosen. Because once you're on this road, it doesn't want you to leave, and it will kill you to make sure you don't.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. This road should not exist. The detour sign appeared too late for any of them to stop. It was one of those temporary warnings, orange, leaning slightly, reflective paint dulled by dust, that promised a faster route around construction, the kind people trusted without thinking, because trusting it was easier than braking hard in the dark. One by one, they turned. Ethan saw the sign first, hands loose on the steering wheel, eyes heavy from hours of night driving. He told himself it would shave 10 minutes off the trip, maybe 15. The GPS recalculated without complaint, the blue line bending obediently onto the unmarked highway. Behind him, Mara followed the same arrow. She had been singing softly to stay awake, the radio low, the road empty. When the sign appeared, she felt relief. Any change was better than the endless straight stretch she'd been on. Further back, a delivery van, an old sedan, a rental SUV. Each driver made the same decision for the same reason. Just a few miles, just a shortcut, just until the road put them back where they belonged. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. At first, nothing felt wrong. The asphalt was smooth, freshly paved, darker than the surrounding highways. The lines were crisp, reflective, almost too perfect. Trees flanked both sides, tall and close, their branches forming a loose canopy that swallowed the stars. Then the signs stopped. No exits, no mile markers, no advertisements for gas or food, just road, trees, darkness. Ethan noticed it when his headlights caught the same bend in a gnarled oak for the third time. He frowned, checked his mirrors, then glanced at the GPS. The map still showed progress. The little arrow moved forward. Miles ticked by. Yet the scenery didn't change. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Mara reached for the radio when the song ended, fingers brushing static. She turned the dial. Every station bled into the same low hiss, punctuated by a voice that repeated fragments of weather reports from different days. Rain in a city she'd passed hours ago, a heat warning from last summer, the same sentence looping, breaking, restarting. She shut it off, suddenly aware of how quiet the car had become. Up ahead, Ethan saw taillights. Relief washed over him. Other drivers meant normalcy, civilization, proof this wasn't just his imagination playing tricks in the dark. He eased closer, matching speed. The vehicle ahead slowed slightly, as if acknowledging him. For a moment, they drove like that, a small, fragile convoy stitched together by headlights. No one noticed when the clocks stopped agreeing. Ethan's dashboard read 12:41 a.m. Mara's phone said 12:03. The delivery van's cracked digital clock blinked 1:17, then went dark entirely. Time seemed to stretch, thin and uncertain, like it couldn't decide whether to move forward. The trees pressed closer. Their bark looked wet, though it hadn't rained. The smells seeped in through vents and cracked windows, damp earth, old leaves, something faintly metallic, as if the forest itself was rusting. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. They should have seen something by now. A cross street, a sign, even a dead end would have made sense. Instead, the highway continued unbroken, swallowing the glow of their headlights and giving nothing back. Ethan tried to remember the last mile marker he'd passed. He couldn't. He knew there had to be one. He remembered seeing white numbers flash by, but when he reached for the memory, it slipped away, like a word on the tip of his tongue that refused to be spoken. The SUV ahead tapped its brakes. Ethan did the same. So did the van behind him. The line of cars slowed, then crawled. Finally, they stopped. Engines idled. Headlights burned holes into the trees. For a long moment, no one moved. Then doors began to open. Ethan stepped out first, the night air colder than he expected. It wrapped around him, heavy, smelling of moss and old water. The road beneath his boots felt solid, real, but the forest beyond the shoulder seemed wrong. Too still, no insects, no wind. Mara joined him, arms folded, eyes scanning the darkness. "Have you been on this road before?" she asked, though something in her voice already knew the answer. "No," said Ethan, "but I feel like I have." They shared a look, uneasy, unspoken thoughts passing between them. Behind them, another driver laughed nervously. Probably just a dead zone, no signal, no signs, happens. No one agreed, no one disagreed. They stood there longer than they meant to. Minutes stretched. The night didn't change. The sky remained starless, a flat black ceiling pressing down on the trees and the road and the people stranded between them. Ethan turned in a slow circle. The road ahead looked exactly like the road behind. Same curve of asphalt, same trees, same darkness waiting just beyond the reach of the headlights. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. A sound drifted through the forest then, soft, almost nothing, like footsteps far away, pacing them just out of sight. Someone whispered, "Did you hear that?" No one answered. And when they finally got back into their cars, hearts pounding, engines roaring a little too loud, each of them believed the same comforting lie. Just a few more miles. They had no idea the road had already closed behind them.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. They all realized the same thing at once. They drove again, because standing still felt worse. Engines hummed, tires whispered against asphalt, and the line of cars stretched out cautiously, each driver leaving more space than before. No one wanted to be too close. No one wanted to be alone. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Hours, maybe. Inside his car, Ethan checked the dashboard clock. 12:41 a.m. The numbers glowed steadily, unwavering. He frowned, tapped the display, then glanced at the GPS. The blue arrow still moved forward, still insisted they were making progress. He picked up his phone. 12:41 a.m. Exactly the same. Behind him, Mara was doing the same thing. She had switched her phone off and back on twice now, watching the screen light up with the same timestamp every time. No missed notifications, no new messages, no signal bars at all. She laughed quietly, a thin sound that surprised her. Okay, that's fine. That's normal. It wasn't. Up ahead, the SUV slowed again, brake lights blooming red in the dark. The convoy eased to a stop for the second time, engines idling like uneasy breathing. Doors opened. This time they gathered closer together, instinct pulling them into a loose circle of headlights. Faces looked pale and unfamiliar in the harsh light, eyes darting to the trees and back again. A man from the delivery van held up his phone. "What time you got?" 12:03, Mara said. 12:41, Ethan replied. The woman from the SUV swallowed. Mine says 1:17. It hasn't changed in I don't know how long. They stared at one another. Someone checked a wristwatch. Another checked a car clock. None of them matched. Worse, none of them were moving forward. The realization settled slowly, like fog filling a low place. Time wasn't passing here. Or it was passing differently for each of them. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Ethan tilted his head back without quite knowing why. The movement felt instinctive, like his body had noticed something before his mind caught up. The sky loomed above them, vast and dark. Too dark. "There should be stars," he said. They all looked up. At first glance, the sky seemed normal, black, deep, endless, but once they focused, the wrongness became clear. There were stars, yes, but they were faint and oddly arranged, like a photograph instead of a sky. None of them twinkled, none of them moved. Ethan traced a familiar constellation with his finger. He waited, counted under his breath. It didn't shift. "The sky was frozen," he said quietly, the words falling out of him without thought. No one laughed. No one asked what he meant, because they felt it too. The forest seemed to lean in, listening. The trees were closer now, or maybe they'd always been that close, and the darkness was just revealing it. Their branches overlapped above the road, swallowing what little light the headlights offered. Mara hugged herself, suddenly aware of how small the circle of safety was. Beyond the beams, there was nothing. No depth, no distance, just black. Maybe it's some kind of optical illusion, like when you stare at something too long? Then why does it feel like we're being watched? Another voice asked. Silence answered. A low sound drifted through the trees. Not a growl, not a voice, something in between. A pressure more than a noise, like air being displaced slowly, deliberately. Everyone turned at once. Nothing was there. The road remained empty. The forest remained still. No movement, no threat they could point to. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Panic crept in sideways. One driver started pacing, boots scraping against asphalt. Another snapped at him to stop moving. Someone suggested calling the police, then remembered there was no signal. Someone else suggested praying, then fell quiet, as if afraid of being overheard. Ethan felt his heart pounding, loud in his ears. He tried to breathe slowly, to anchor himself in logic. Roads don't do this, he told himself. Skies don't freeze. Time doesn't splinter. And yet... Mara leaned close to him, her voice barely above a whisper. If time isn't moving, what is? He didn't answer, because he was thinking about the GPS, about the blue arrow still inching forward, about how something, somewhere, wanted them to keep driving. The road didn't speak, it didn't signal, it didn't threaten. It simply waited. Eventually, engines restarted, not because they had a plan, but because standing still felt like surrender. As they pulled back onto the highway, headlights cutting weak tunnels through the dark, Ethan glanced once more at the sky. The stars watched him back, unmoving. And far ahead, beyond the reach of the light, the road stretched on, straight, endless, and patient, already certain they would follow.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. The first car tried to turn around. They drove for a long time before anyone spoke. The convoy had stretched thin now, instinct forcing distance between vehicles. Headlights no longer overlapped. Each car carved its own fragile tunnel through the dark, surrounded by trees that seemed to grow closer with every mile, if miles were even passing. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Inside the SUV at the front, Claire's hands ached from gripping the wheel. She had stopped checking the clock, stopped looking at the sky. The sense of being watched pressed against her skin, subtle but constant, like static before a storm. "This is stupid," she said suddenly, voice sharp in the quiet car. "We're just driving in circles." Her husband didn't answer right away. He stared ahead, jaw tight. The road looked the same as it had an hour ago, or 2, or 10. "We should turn around," Claire said. "Right now." He hesitated. Behind them, the others followed without knowing what decision was being made. No signals, no warning, just the steady red glow of taillights leading them deeper into the night. Claire didn't ask again. She slowed, eased onto the shoulder, and turned the wheel. At first, nothing happened. The SUV rolled to a stop. Gravel crunched softly beneath the tires. For a moment, a dangerous, hopeful moment, it felt normal, like any other roadside pause before a correction. Then she put the car in reverse. The headlights flickered. Not off, not on. They pulsed, dimming and brightening like something breathing through them. The radio crackled to life without being touched, releasing a burst of overlapping voices, weather reports, emergency alerts, fragments of prayers, before collapsing back into static. "Claire," her husband said, "stop." She pressed the accelerator. The car moved backward an inch. Then the road shuddered. It wasn't an earthquake. There was no shaking, no violent jolt. The asphalt beneath the tires softened, subtly like heated wax. The painted lines smeared, bending inward, stretching toward the rear bumper. The trees leaned, not fell, leaned, as if curious. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Behind the SUV, Ethan saw the taillights warp, elongate, sink. "Something's wrong," he said, already slowing. Mara leaned forward, heart hammering. "They're sinking." The SUV lurched. The rear tires dipped, not into a hole, but into the road itself, which had begun to curve upward at the edges, forming a shallow bowl. Asphalt rippled like liquid stone, swallowing rubber inch by inch. Claire screamed. She slammed the brakes, shifted gears, tried to pull forward, but the front tires spun uselessly. The road had tightened its grip, holding the vehicle in place with patient certainty. "It doesn't stop you," Ethan whispered, though he didn't know why the words came to him then. "It teaches you." The engine roared. The sound echoed too long, stretching unnaturally, until it felt like it was coming from everywhere at once. The smell hit next, burning rubber, hot oil, and beneath it, something older, damp, rotting, alive. The SUV tilted backward. Not quickly, not violently, slowly, like the road wanted them to understand. Claire clawed at the door handle, but it wouldn't open. The metal groaned, frame bending inward as the asphalt rose higher, pressing against the sides of the vehicle. From the other cars, no one moved. They watched, frozen, helpless. The headlights of the SUV went dark. Then the screaming stopped. The road smoothed itself. Where the car had been, there was nothing now, no debris, no marks, no sign a vehicle had ever existed there at all. Just clean, unbroken asphalt stretching into darkness. The forest exhaled. For a long time, no one spoke. Engines idled, hearts pounded, breath came shallow and fast. Mara covered her mouth, tears streaking silently down her face. Ethan couldn't look away from the empty space where the SUV had vanished. "They're gone," someone whispered. "Not dead, gone." The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Eventually, Ethan turned off his engine. The sudden quiet felt obscene. "They tried to leave, that's all they did," he said, voice hoarse. No one argued, because the message was clear now. The road didn't block escape. It punished the attempt. "It doesn't stop you," Mara murmured, the phrase settling into her bones. It teaches you. Ahead of them, the darkness waited. Behind them, there was nothing left to return to. One by one, engines restarted, not with hope, but with obedience. And as the convoy moved forward again, slower than before, every driver understood the same terrible truth. The road had rules now, and it had just taught them the first one.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Night has rules here. The darkness deepened without warning. One moment, the road ahead was dim but navigable, headlights pushing back the night just enough to feel in control. The next, the black thickened, layered, heavy, like ink poured over the world. The beams from the cars no longer stretched far. They stopped short, swallowed after a few dozen feet, leaving the rest of the road to imagination. And imagination here was dangerous. The convoy slowed instinctively. Tires whispered, engines lowered to cautious murmurs. No one wanted to outrun their headlights. No one wanted to discover what waited beyond them. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Ethan noticed the shapes first. They weren't clear, not solid, just suggestions at the edge of the light, tall silhouettes between the trees, too narrow to be trunks, too still to be animals. When he glanced directly at them, they receded, dissolving back into shadow. When he looked away, they returned. Mara felt it too, that crawling sensation between the shoulder blades, the certainty of eyes where none could be seen. She kept her gaze forward, afraid that acknowledging the shapes would make them braver. Headlights flickered again, not failing, just adjusting, as if the darkness demanded it. They stopped after what felt like hours. Cars pulled close, forming a brighter island against the night. Doors opened quickly, then closed again, as if everyone realized at once that stepping too far from the light was a mistake. No one screamed, no one panicked, not yet. A man from the delivery van, older, gray at the temples, eyes sharp despite the fear, cleared his throat. I think this place works like something alive." They turned to him. He swallowed, choosing his words carefully. "Not alive like us, more like a system, an ecosystem." The forest seemed to lean closer. "Every time we do something, it reacts, like it's correcting behavior." Ethan thought of the SUV, of asphalt swallowing metal. He nodded slowly. Boundaries, consequences. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. As if on cue, one of the shapes stepped closer to the light. Just one step. It wasn't fully visible, just the suggestion of a limb, darker than the dark around it. Too long, too thin. Mara gasped. Everyone looked. The shape froze. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then it retreated, smoothly, silently, back into the trees. No attack, no sound, just withdrawal. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. "Yes," Ethan said. "What happens if we don't look?" another voice asked. No one volunteered to try. Minutes passed. The darkness didn't advance, but it didn't loosen its grip either. The air felt thicker now, harder to breathe. The smell of damp earth had grown stronger, layered with something sharp and electrical, like ozone after lightning. A strange calm settled over them. Not safety, acceptance. "If you follow the rules, you live longer," the man from the van said quietly. "If you follow the rules, you live longer," Mara repeated, as if testing it. They began to notice patterns. The shapes never crossed into full light. The darkness never rushed. It crept. The road remained solid as long as they moved forward and stayed together. Engines idling too long drew whispers from the trees. Flashing high beams made the shadows stir. The road wasn't cruel. It was instructional. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. They drove again, slower now, more deliberate, headlights steady, no sudden movements, no looking too long into the dark. For a while, dangerously, deceptively, it worked. The shapes kept their distance, the darkness held, the fear settled into something manageable, like a low fever instead of a raging one. Mara even laughed once, softly at something Ethan said about how this would make a terrible Yelp review. The sound felt wrong but comforting, a reminder they were still human. Then the radio clicked on. No one touched it. A calm voice filled the car, distorted but clear enough to understand. Remain in your vehicles. Help is on the way. Relief surged, fast, intoxicating. Then the voice repeated, exactly the same tone, same words, over and over. Ethan reached to turn it off. The moment his fingers brushed the dial, the headlights dimmed. The shapes surged closer, not running, not attacking, just stepping nearer, confident. Ethan pulled his hand back. The lights brightened again. The shapes stopped. The radio fell silent. If you follow the rules, you live longer. They drove on, shaken, quieter than before. And far ahead, beyond the reach of their headlights, something adjusted its expectations, patient, observant, already preparing the next lesson.
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5. Something is following, but it never runs. They learned not to stop, not completely. Engines idled low now, always humming, always ready. Even when they slowed to a crawl, no one shut the car off. The memory of silence, of what crept closer when the noise died, was too fresh. Because every time an engine stopped, the footsteps began. At first, Ethan thought it was his imagination, a faint rhythm beneath the sound of his own breathing, soft impacts, uneven, like shoes on gravel far behind the car. He told himself it was an echo, wind, stress twisting ordinary sounds into threats. Then Mara heard them too. They had pulled over briefly, just enough to regroup, headlights forming their familiar island of safety. The moment the last engine cut out, the sound arrived. Step. Pause. Step. Not rushing, not dragging, walking. Mara's skin prickled. The footsteps didn't come from one direction. They circled the edge of the light, always just beyond it, always careful not to cross. When Ethan restarted the engine, the footsteps stopped, instantly, as if someone had frozen mid-stride. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. They didn't talk about it at first. Talking made it real. Instead, they drove, mile after mile of unchanging asphalt, the forest pressing close, the sky frozen above them like a painted ceiling. The darkness felt thicker now, layered with expectation. That was when the voices began. Mara heard hers first. She was staring ahead, eyelids heavy, when her name drifted through the car. Mara. Soft, familiar. Her mother's voice. She stiffened, hands tightening on the steering wheel. Her mother had been dead for 3 years. She hadn't spoken that name aloud in weeks. Mara, the voice said again, closer now, almost affectionate. She didn't answer. She didn't turn her head. Her heart raced, but the road ahead remained unchanged. The headlights didn't flicker. The shapes stayed back. The voice sighed and faded. In the car behind her, Ethan heard his name spoken differently. Short, sharp, like a warning. Ethan. It came from the back seat. He nearly swerved. He forced himself to keep driving, eyes locked on the road, pulse hammering. The voice didn't repeat itself. It didn't need to. It had proven it could reach him. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Soon, everyone had heard something. A nickname no one used anymore, a childhood insult, a voice from a past they'd tried to forget. The sounds slipped through cracked windows, through vents, through memories, always softly, always patiently.
"It doesn't chase," the man from the van said when they stopped again, engines running, doors closed. His face was pale, eyes rimmed red. "It waits." No one disagreed, because whatever followed them had learned something too. Running caused panic. Panic caused mistakes. Waiting caused fear to ferment. They noticed other patterns then. The footsteps only came when engines stopped. The voices never spoke twice in the same way. And whatever it was, it never entered the light. Mara pressed her forehead to the steering wheel briefly, breathing hard. "We knows us," she whispered. "It listens," Ethan corrected. "It learns." The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Hours passed, though outside the night stayed the same. Fatigue crept in, dangerous and heavy. Eyes burned, muscles ached. Fear became background noise, a constant hum beneath every thought. That was when the whispers grew bolder. Mara heard laughter once, not her mother's this time, her own. A recording perfect imitation, playing just behind her left ear. She slammed the brakes before she realized what she was doing. The car skidded to a stop. Engines behind her cut off instinctively, one by one. Silence fell. The footsteps began immediately. Closer this time, no longer circling, approaching. Step, step, step. Ethan's headlights caught movement at the edge of the trees. Not a shape, an absence, a place where darkness folded inward, deeper than it should have been. "Mara," he shouted, "drive!" She fumbled for the ignition, hands shaking. The footsteps were loud now, confident. Waiting had ended. The engine roared to life. The footsteps stopped mid-step. The darkness recoiled. They drove again, hearts pounding, breaths ragged. The lesson burned deep into their bones. It doesn't chase, it waits. And it was learning exactly long enough for them to make the next mistake. Far behind them, just beyond the reach of light, something smiled without a face and kept pace effortlessly, knowing it didn't need to hurry. The road would do the rest.
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6. The road separates the weak first. Hunger arrived quietly, not as pain at first, but as irritation, short tempers, foggy thoughts, hands that trembled when they shouldn't. Water bottles were passed back and forth, counted and recounted, each sip measured against a future no one could see. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. They stopped less often now, and when they did, it was brief. Engines running, lights on, no wandering, no arguments that lasted too long. Still, tension crept in like mold. A man from the back car accused someone of hoarding food. A woman snapped that no one had asked him to drive a half-empty van into hell. Voices rose, sharp and brittle, echoing too loudly in the night. The forest listened. Ethan felt it, the way the darkness seemed to lean closer when anger spiked, how the air thickened when fear turned outward instead of inward. The road responded to emotion the way skin responds to heat, with attention. "We need to calm down," he said, forcing his voice steady. "This place reacts." Mara nodded, eyes sunken with exhaustion. "It's like it's sorting us." No one liked that word, but it fit. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Hours passed, though outside the night stayed the same. Fatigue hollowed them out. The headlights ahead blurred. The space between cars widened, then narrowed again as drivers fought sleep and dread in equal measure. That was when the road began to stretch. Not visibly, not dramatically, just enough. The distance between Ethan's headlights and Mara's taillights seemed to grow by a few feet at a time, then a few more. No matter how he adjusted his speed, the gap refused to close completely. "Mara?" he said into the radio. Static answered. Ahead of him, her taillights flickered once, then steadied. The forest pressed closer, branches arcing overhead like ribs. "The road knows who won't survive," the man from the van murmured over the open channel. He sounded calmer than anyone else, resigned. "It always starts thinning the herd." "Don't say that," someone snapped, but the phrase lingered. "The road knows who won't survive." They saw it happen without understanding how. One moment there were 5 cars, the next there were 4. No crash, no scream, no sudden stop, just an absence. Ethan blinked hard, certain his eyes were lying to him. The space where the 4th car should have been, where its headlights had glowed only seconds earlier, was empty. "Mara?" he said again, louder now. Nothing. He sped up, heart pounding. The road ahead stretched endlessly, smooth and unbroken. No debris, no skid marks, no sound but his own engine and breathing. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. They stopped. Too fast, too close together. Panic tore through what little discipline they had left. "She was right there," Ethan said, voice cracking. "She was right in front of me." They searched with their lights, sweeping the forest edge without stepping into it. Shadows recoiled, shapes shifted but did not approach. There was nothing, no trace, no warmth where a car's engine should have been, no tire tracks leading off the road. It was as if Mara and her vehicle had been lifted cleanly out of reality. Someone began to cry. Someone else whispered, "She didn't even have time to be afraid." That was worse. The road knows who won't survive. Ethan felt the truth of it settle into him, cold and absolute. The road wasn't random. It wasn't hungry in the way predators were hungry. It was selective. Mara had been exhausted, running on fumes. Her focus had slipped for just a moment, and the road had noticed. They drove again because there was nothing else to do. Grief had no space here. Mourning required stillness, and stillness was dangerous. As they moved forward, the gaps between cars closed instinctively. No one wanted to be the last set of headlights. No one wanted to drift too close to the dark between beams. The forest smelled sweeter now. Rot mixed with something floral, almost inviting. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel, repeating the phrase in his head like a prayer and a warning. The road knows who won't survive. And somewhere ahead, in the patient dark, the road was already deciding who would be next.
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7. They found proof others died here. The road gave them something new at dawn. Not light, there was no dawn here, but a widening. The trees thinned slightly, pulling back just enough to reveal a shoulder broader than any they'd seen before. The asphalt was still perfect, still dark and smooth, but to the right of it lay something impossible. A car. Rusted. Collapsed inward on itself like a crushed can. Its paint had peeled away in long, flaking strips, leaving bare metal gnawed by time and moisture. The tires were gone. No rubber, no rims, just empty arches resting directly on the ground. They slowed as one. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The road stayed straight,
but everything else vanished. Ethan stopped beside the wreck, engine idling. The others pulled in close behind him, headlights washing over the scene. In the harsh white beams, more shapes emerged. Another car further back, then another. Some overturned, some half sunk into the earth as if the ground had softened for them the way it had for the SUV that tried to turn around. "This is old," someone whispered. "Too old. These cars didn't belong to the same decade or even the same century. Boxy frames sat beside sleek modern shells, license plates from different states, different countries, different eras." They stepped out carefully, staying within the overlapping circles of light. The air here smelled worse, thick with rot and metal and something faintly sweet, like decay that had gone on long enough to forget itself. Ethan noticed bones first, not scattered, arranged. A rib cage leaned against a guardrail that hadn't been there moments ago. A skull rested in the driver's seat of a rusted sedan, turned slightly toward the road, as if watching for headlights that would never arrive. Morrow wasn't there to see it. The absence hit him harder than the sight. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Handwritten signs were nailed to trees near the wrecks. The paper was yellowed, edges curled, ink faded but still legible. "Don't stop for voices." Another further down, "Stay in the light, never look back." A third written in shaking letters, almost carved into cardboard, "The road lies." They read them out loud, one by one. Silence followed. "Those can't all be true," the man from the van said slowly. "No," Ethan agreed, "they can't. Because they contradicted each other. They had stopped for voices and survived. They had stayed in the light and lost people anyway. They had trusted the road and been punished, distrusted it and punished again. Every rule they'd learned had worked until it hadn't. Every survivor lies, eventually. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with implication. Every survivor lies eventually, not because they want to, because the truth keeps changing. They moved carefully through the wreckage, hearts pounding, eyes darting. Ethan found a notebook wedged beneath a collapsed dashboard. The pages were brittle, ink smudged by moisture and time. He flipped through them slowly. Day 1, detour. Same sign, same mistake. Day 3, the night hasn't changed. We're still driving. Day 6, one of us is gone. Don't know how. Day 9, the road listens. Don't talk about escape. The number scratched out violently. It wants a decision. The last page was torn out. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. They didn't linger long. The shapes in the trees were closer here, pressing against the edge of the light with visible impatience. The voices whispered louder, overlapping now, fragments of warnings and pleas and lies. Ethan felt the wrongness of this place deep in his chest. This wasn't a graveyard, it was a lesson plan. The road didn't just kill, it taught through repetition, cycle after cycle, each one learning just enough to survive longer than the last, then failing in a new way. Every survivor lies eventually, because the truth that saved you once would damn you next time. They drove again, shaken, quieter than before. No one trusted the signs anymore. No one trusted their own conclusions. As the wreckage disappeared behind them, swallowed by darkness as if it had never existed,
Ethan realized the most terrifying part wasn't the bones or the warnings. It was the certainty that somewhere ahead there would be another place like this, and one day someone else would slow down, see what remained of them, and understand too late that survival here was temporary. The road was patient, and it was still rewriting the rules.
Chapter 8.
Chapter 8. The Road Offers a Deal. The voice arrived gently, not as a command, not as a threat, as a suggestion. They were driving when it happened, heads down, eyes burning, fear worn thin by exhaustion. The convoy had shrunk again, fewer headlights, more darkness between them. The road stretched ahead, smooth and unblemished, as if mocking everything they had seen behind them. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. Ethan noticed the radio light first. It flickered on without a sound, no static, no hiss, just a soft glow, steady and patient. Then the mirrors began to change. Not dramatically, not all at once. In Ethan's rear view, the darkness didn't reflect correctly. The trees lagged slightly behind the movement of the car, as if the image were buffering. When he shifted his eyes, the reflection sharpened again. "Don't," he whispered to himself. "Don't stare." The radio spoke, not through the speakers, through the silence between words. "You've done well," the voice said, not loud, not quiet, but perfectly audible, layered beneath the hum of the engine. It wasn't male or female. It wasn't young or old. It sounded like certainty. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. The others heard it too, he knew, by the way their brake lights flared, by the subtle swerving as fear jolted tired bodies awake. "You followed the rules," the voice continued. "You adapted." In the mirror, Ethan saw something impossible, a stretch of road behind them that looked normal. Streetlights, painted signs, a distant glow that suggested a town, an exit. Hope surged before he could stop it. "You can leave," the voice said. The words landed like a blow. Mara would have laughed. She would have called it a trick. But Mara was gone. "What's the cost?" the man from the van asked hoarsely. The voice didn't answer directly. Instead, the radio clicked through stations, fast, precise, until it settled on silence again. "Balance," it said. "Continuity." The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. In the mirrors, the exit flickered. Closer now. "So that's it," someone whispered. "We just drive back?" "No," Ethan said. He didn't know how he knew, but he did. "Not all of us." The voice hummed softly, pleased. "You understand," it said. The implication pressed in from all sides, heavy as the dark. Someone must stay behind. Someone must be payment. "The road always gets paid," the voice said, almost kindly. Panic rippled through the group, not explosive, but sharp and contained. Eyes darted. People shifted in their seats, suddenly aware of how alone they truly were, even surrounded by others. "No," someone said. "That's not... No, we won't..." The radio cut to static for half a second. When the voice returned, it was colder. "Every cycle ends this way." The mirrors changed again. This time, Ethan saw the wreckage from earlier, the rusted cars, the bones, but now they were whole, occupied, people sitting inside, hands on wheels, faces calm, waiting. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. "Choose," the voice said. No timer, no countdown, just expectation. The shapes in the trees leaned closer, the darkness thickened, headlights dimmed slightly as if conserving energy. The road was patient. Ethan's mind raced. He thought of the notebook, of the torn-out page, of the warnings that contradicted each other. Every survivor lies, eventually, because someone always tells themselves the choice was necessary. The mirrors flickered again. This time, the exit was closer, clearer, real. "I won't," someone said suddenly, a young man Ethan barely knew. His voice shook, but there was resolve in it too. "I won't do this. I won't be part of it." He swerved, just a little, enough to break formation. The road responded instantly. The asphalt ahead of his car brightened, then softened. The headlights flared white, then went out. His scream cut off mid-sound. When the light returned, there was no car, no trace. The radio crackled once. Transaction accepted. Silence followed. The exit in the mirrors solidified. Streetlights glowed warm and yellow. The shapes retreated. The darkness loosened its grip. The road stayed straight, but everything else began, slowly, to return. No one celebrated. No one spoke, because they all understood the truth now, burned into them deeper than fear. The road always gets paid. And it would remember who let it collect.
Chapter 8.
Chapter 9. Escape was never the point. They drove toward the exit in silence. Streetlights glowed ahead, warm, familiar, impossibly gentle after the long, starving dark. Painted signs appeared. Lane markings branched and merged the way roads were supposed to. The forest loosened its grip, trees pulling back as if they'd never leaned in at all. Normal returned too easily. That should have been the warning. The road stayed straight, but everything else changed. Ethan felt it first, the weight in his chest that refused to lift. Relief should have come, joy, tears, something. Instead, there was only dread. They passed beneath the first streetlight. Its glow washed over the car, revealing scratches along the doors Ethan didn't remember earning. Handprints on the glass, faint, smeared, as if someone had pressed their palms there from the outside. The light flickered once, then stabilized. Behind them, the darkness did not follow. It stopped exactly where the light ended. "They're letting us go," someone said softly over the radio. "No," Ethan replied. His voice sounded older than it should have. "They're done with us." The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. As they drove, memory returned in fragments. The notebook, the torn-out page, the bones arranged like markers instead of remains. The voice that never lied, only omitted. Ethan understood then, not all at once, but with awful clarity. The road didn't want bodies. Bodies were easy. Fear was harder. Choice was rarer. Guilt lasted forever. "You weren't trapped," Ethan said, more to himself than to anyone else. "You were being measured." The phrase felt right, too right. The man from the van spoke next, his tone flat, hollow. "That's why the rules kept changing." "Yes," Ethan said, "rules don't matter, reactions do." The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. They remembered the early moments now with brutal clarity, how some had panicked immediately, how others had tried to control, how a few had watched silently and learned. The road hadn't punished escape. It had punished refusal. Refusal to choose, refusal to accept the cost. The first car hadn't been swallowed because it turned around. It had been swallowed because its driver believed escape should be free. The road always gets paid, not in flesh, in consent. The realization hit the others slowly, one by one. You could hear it in the way breathing changed, in the way no one spoke the names of the lost anymore, because naming them would mean admitting what they'd allowed. You weren't trapped, Ethan repeated. You were being measured. Measured for what you'd do when the night wouldn't end. Measured for who you'd sacrifice when the rules demanded balance. Measured for how easily you'd justify it afterwards. They passed a sign welcoming them to a town Ethan recognized. He'd driven through it once years ago. Same diner, same gas station, same bend in the road. Too perfect. What happens now? Someone asked. Ethan checked the mirror. For just a moment, the road behind them wasn't a road at all, but a reflection of headlights approaching from the opposite direction. Fresh ones, unafraid ones. New arrivals. They're resetting, Ethan said, with someone else. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. The guilt arrived fully then, not loud, not crushing, persistent. Ethan felt it settle behind his eyes, in his throat, in the small spaces between thoughts. He knew it would never leave. Not really. None of them would ever tell the full truth. They'd say it was an accident. They'd say there was nothing they could do. They'd say the road took him. Every survivor lies, eventually, because the truth is harder to live with. The car rolled into town. The radio crackled to life this time with a normal station, music, advertisements, a voice talking about tomorrow's weather. Ethan pulled over. The others did too. No one got out right away. They sat there breathing recycled air, listening to normal sounds that felt obscene after what they'd learned. "You think it'll ever let us forget?" someone asked. Ethan shook his head. Why would it? The road didn't need to follow them anymore. They would carry it themselves. As Ethan finally opened the car door, he glanced once more at the mirror. For just a second, the streetlight behind him flickered, and in its reflection, the road watched, satisfied, patient, already waiting for the next ones to believe escape was the reward. Because escape was never the point. The test was.
Chapter 10.
Chapter 10. Someone is still driving. Normal life returned too quickly. Ethan noticed it in the small things first. The smell of hot coffee drifting from an open diner door, the distant sound of a truck shifting gears, the way streetlights buzzed with familiar imperfection. The world felt real again, solid, obedient. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. The road stayed straight, but everything else pretended to change. They separated without ceremony, no promises to keep in touch, no exchanged numbers. Trauma didn't bomb them the way shared memories usually did. It isolated them, each survivor retreating into the private weight of what they'd allowed. Ethan drove alone. Daylight crept in slowly, bleeding gray into the sky. His clock ticked forward again. His phone buzzed with missed messages that felt like artifacts from another life. Mile markers passed. Exit signs appeared and disappeared the way they were supposed to. Yet his hands wouldn't relax on the steering wheel, because the road still felt wrong. At a red light, he glanced at his rear-view mirror. For just a second, the reflection lagged. Not enough for anyone else to notice, enough for him. The forest wasn't there, but the sense of depth was. That endlessness, that patience. Someone was still driving. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. That night, Ethan dreamed of headlights, not his own, others, approaching from far behind. One set, then two, then many, all moving steadily forward, never gaining, never falling back. He woke with his heart racing, the phrase echoing through him like a verdict. You weren't trapped, you were being measured. Days passed, then weeks. Ethan tried to talk about it once to a coworker casually over lunch. He described the detour, the night, the feeling of being watched. The coworker laughed. Sounds like you just needed sleep. Ethan laughed too. Every survivor lies eventually, because the truth made people uncomfortable, because the truth suggested the road wasn't finished. He avoided driving at night after that, took trains when he could, declined road trips, made excuses, built a smaller world with safer edges. It didn't matter. The road didn't need him to return. It had already taken something. One evening, months later, Ethan stopped at a gas station just off the highway. The place was empty except for a single car at the far pump, engine running, headlights on, driver sitting very still behind the wheel. The sky was dark, too dark for the time of day. Ethan froze. The car's lights didn't illuminate the lot correctly. They seemed to stop short, swallowed by shadow that shouldn't have been there. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. He told himself to leave. Instead, he watched. The driver finally stepped out, a young woman, tense, scanning the horizon with the same wary confusion Ethan remembered too well. She checked her phone, looked around for signs, for reassurance, for answers. Ethan opened his mouth. He could warn her, tell her to turn around, tell her not to trust detours or silence or voices that offered help too easily. But the words wouldn't come, because what would he say? That the road wasn't a place? That it was a test? That escape had a cost? The woman got back into her car. The engine revved. She pulled onto the highway. Ethan stood there long after her taillights vanished. He understood then, not as fear, but as certainty. Leaving the road didn't mean surviving it. It meant becoming part of it. Not in body, in function. The road stayed straight, but everything else vanished. That night, far away, the detour sign appeared again, leaning slightly, reflective paint catching just enough light to be convincing. Another driver saw it too late. Another wheel turned, and somewhere between the dark and the silence, the road adjusted, counting, measuring, preparing, because the cycle never breaks, it only replaces. Someone is still always driving, and the road doesn't end. It replaces you.
The road was never a place. It was a question. How long can you survive when escape isn't the reward? How far will you go before fear rewrites who you are? Every person who entered believed they were different, smarter, stronger, more deserving. But the road doesn't care who you were before you arrived. It only cares who you become when no one is watching and the night won't end. So listen carefully. If you ever find yourself driving a road that feels wrong, don't test it, don't challenge it, and never believe you're the first one there. Because the road is still waiting, and someone is always next.